the time I turned 55, I thought I'd won at life. I had wealth, comfort, and a future that felt secure. Then my own son and his wife turned on me and stripped it all away. The cars, the house, the money, everything vanished. I escaped to another state with nothing left and took a job cleaning courtrooms. No one believed I'd ever been an attorney. Then one afternoon, I watched an elderly man stand alone while the state's most feared lawyer prepared to crush him. I set my mop aside and spoke up. "Your Honor, I'll represent him." People laughed. 20 minutes later, the room fell silent. His name was cleared, and the judge's expression changed when the truth came out. My client was a powerful media figure. "Stay with me until the end, and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. My name is Elma, and at 55 I believed my life was perfectly mapped out. I owned a $3 million home on Oakage Drive, drove a Mercedes worth more than many people earn in a year, and ran a law practice bringing in over $2 million annually. But more than the money, I believed I had raised a son who cared about me. That belief turned out to be the biggest mistake of all. The day everything collapsed began like any ordinary Tuesday. I was reviewing contracts in my home office when my son, Jasper, walked in. His tailored suit was flawless, just like always. At 32, he had my sharp features, but none of my discipline. Still, he was my only child, and for years I'd told myself his sense of entitlement was just a stage. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, sitting across from me. Something in his voice made me look up immediately. "Of course," I replied. "What's going on?" He placed a thick folder on my desk, his face carefully neutral. "I've been handling your finances for 5 years now, and there are some serious problems." My chest tightened. I had given him power of attorney after he finished law school, thinking it would teach him responsibility and ease my workload. "What kind of problems?" He opened the folder, revealing bank records, investment summaries, and legal papers I didn't recognize. "Your spending is out of control," he said. "The mortgage alone is $12,000 a month. Credit cards are maxed out. The business account is in the red." I stared at the pages, completely disoriented. "That can't be right. The firm brings in over $2 million a year. My personal account should hold at least $4 million. Had. Jasper corrected, his voice suddenly colder. "You've been living beyond your limits for years. I tried to manage it, but it's too late." My hands shook as I scanned the statements. Large withdrawals, 50,000, 75,000, even 100,000, appeared again and again. I had never approved any of them. "Jasper, I didn't make these transactions. I would remember." He cut me off gently, almost kindly. "Mom, you've been forgetting things, conversations, decisions. I've been covering for you, but I can't anymore." The words hit me harder than anything else. Forgetful? I handled complex cases, remembered every detail of my clients' lives. "I am not forgetful," I said firmly. "I never authorized this." He sighed, the sound heavy with practiced concern. "Lenny and I have talked about this for months. We think you need help." The mention of his wife made my skin go cold. Lenny had married Jasper 8 years earlier, drawn to his trust fund and comfortable life. She had no career, no ambition, just an appetite for spending money she hadn't earned. I tolerated her for my son's sake, but I never trusted the way her eyes measured everything I owned. "What does Lenny have to do with my finances?" I asked. "She's been helping me organize things," he said smoothly. "Mom, the truth is, you're broke. Worse than that. There are government claims against the firm. The house is 3 months behind. Credit cards are completely tapped." The room felt like it was spinning. I had spent 3 decades building my life, giving up friendships, vacations, everything, just to feel secure. "Show me the real balances," I said. Jasper pulled out his phone and opened a banking app. My main account showed $347. Savings, 0. Investments, gone. "Where did it all go?" I whispered. "Your lifestyle," he replied. "Shopping trips you don't remember, bad investments, loans you signed for people who never paid you back." More papers appeared, luxury purchases I'd never made, contracts with signatures that looked like mine but didn't feel like me, loan agreements with numbers that made my head spin. "I didn't sign these," I said, but my voice wavered. The signatures were convincing, the dates recent, and Jasper's confidence made me doubt myself. "The doctor warned this could happen," he continued calmly. "Early cognitive decline can affect judgment, especially with money. That's why you trusted me, to protect you." The word echoed in my mind like a sentence being passed. I had never been diagnosed with anything. I hadn't felt confused or lost. Yet as I stared at the evidence spread across my desk, uncertainty crept in. "What are you saying, Jasper?" "I'm saying you need help, professional help," he said calmly. "Lenny and I found a very nice place upstate. You'll be safe there, comfortable. Selling the house and what's left of your assets will cover the expenses for years." My reality shifted in an instant. "You want to put me away?" "It's for your own good," Jasper replied without hesitation. "You can't live on your own anymore, and we can't keep watching your spending. There you'll have supervision and medical support all the time." I studied his face. The face of the child I had raised, supported, and believed in for over 30 years, and finally understood that I was looking at someone I no longer knew. The warmth I once saw in his eyes was gone, replaced by calculation. "And you and Lenny?" I asked quietly. "Where will you live?" "We're moving into a downtown penthouse," he said. "Rent's only $8,000 a month. It's closer to my new consulting work." Penthouse, consulting work. The numbers fell into place with chilling clarity. An apartment at that price meant a lifestyle he had never earned. His new venture was being fueled by my liquidated life. "You're taking my money," I said softly. For a split second, his expression cracked, revealing something sharp underneath. "I'm preserving what's left," he snapped. "If this keeps going, you'll lose everything anyway. This way, something can still be saved." "For who?" I asked. "For your care," he replied, "and later, your legacy." Legacy. He meant inheritance. My own son was dismantling my life to fund his future while convincing me I was incapable of thinking clearly. I stood, my legs trembling. "I want to speak to my attorney," I said. "Robert Chen has handled my affairs for 15 years. Jasper's voice softened, almost convincingly. "Mom, Robert retired 6 months ago. You were at his farewell party, don't you remember?" I searched my mind and found nothing. Either my memory had truly failed me, or Jasper was far more skilled at deception than I ever imagined. "Then I'll find someone else," I said. "With what money?" he replied evenly. "And who do you think will believe you? I have years of records showing poor judgment, medical notes suggesting decline, witnesses who've seen your behavior change." That's when I understood. This wasn't bad news. It was a reveal. The power of attorney, the quiet separation from my colleagues, the repeated hints that I was becoming forgetful. Every step had been planned. "Why?" I whispered. "Because I shouldn't have to wait for you to be gone," he said plainly. "Lenny and I have plans. We deserve more than scraping by while you sit on millions." The cruelty of it stole my breath. This was the child I had cared for through illness, the boy I read stories to, the young man I put through law school at enormous cost. "You have 48 hours, he continued, businesslike now. "Pack your personal things. The house goes up Friday. You'll be moved this weekend." I searched his face for any trace of the boy who once clung to me during storms, who made handmade cards with crayons. That child no longer existed. "What if I refuse?" I asked. "Then I'll have you declared unfit and placed there involuntarily," he said. "The paperwork is ready. This way is easier for everyone." I wondered how long he'd been building his case, which professionals he had convinced, what stories he had told to create proof of a problem that didn't exist. I turned toward the window, staring at the garden I'd planted years ago. The roses were in full bloom, bright against the morning light. In 2 days, none of it would be mine. "Does Lenny know?" I asked. "It was her idea," he replied, standing up. "She's good with finances." Of course she was. I asked for time. He told me not to take long. Everything was already arranged. I listened as he gathered his papers, as his shoes crossed the rug. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, I am sorry it ended this way." He wasn't. I could hear the relief in his voice. After he left, I stayed by the window until dusk. And by then I had decided I wasn't going anywhere he chose for me. I packed one small suitcase, withdrew the remaining $347, and left a note on his childhood pillow. "You win, but you'll never see me again." At 55, I walked away from everything I had built, carrying only what I could fit in my hands, and the painful truth that my own son had undone my life. As I drove into the night, one thought followed me without mercy. I had raised a monster, and now I had to learn how to survive him. 6 months after I disappeared from my old life, I stood inside a supply closet at the Riverside County Courthouse, staring at my reflection in a cracked mirror taped to the door. The woman looking back at me felt unfamiliar. My hair, streaked with gray, was pulled into a tight, practical ponytail. My hands were rough from harsh cleaning chemicals. I wore a faded blue uniform with the name Alma stitched onto the pocket. That first night, I had driven nearly 800 miles, stopping only when my car finally ran out of gas. I ended up in a small town called Millbrook, population 15,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, except no one cared about mine. It was the perfect place to vanish. The courthouse job became both my lifeline and my quiet humiliation. $11 an hour to scrub floors in a building where I had once argued cases with confidence and authority. Every day, I pushed a yellow cleaning cart through hallways lined with law books, past courtrooms where justice was supposed to live. The irony followed me everywhere. "Alma, you missed a spot in courtroom 3, my supervisor Marco called as I stepped out of the supply closet. Marco was 45, kind, and exhausted from working 2 jobs to support his family. He had no idea the woman holding a mop once billed clients $500 an hour. "I'll get it," I said, relieved that my voice no longer trembled when talking about courthouse work. The first month had been unbearable. I listened to arguments I could have dismantled in minutes. I watched people receive weak representation while I stood silent, cleaning up after them. Slowly, the pain dulled. Not disappeared, but dulled. I wheeled my cart back toward courtroom 3, the wheels squeaking loudly. The judge had stepped out for lunch, but a few attorneys remained, clustered around the defense table. I recognized the look immediately: young public defenders, overwhelmed, underpaid, trying to do the impossible. "They've got 12 witnesses," one woman said, stress tight in her voice. "We've had 3 days to prepare." 3, for a case like this. Her colleague sighed. "Welcome to public defense." "At least Thompson isn't handling it," she added. "That man would win against anyone if it helped his record." Thompson. District Attorney Marcus Thompson. Ruthless, untouchable. A man who treated convictions like stepping stones toward higher office. I'd read about him in the local paper. I started mopping near their table, making myself invisible. People rarely noticed cleaning staff. They talked freely, as if we weren't there at all. In 6 months, I had overheard more secrets, deals, and questionable practices than most journalists ever would. "Did you see the article about the Westfield Heights case?" one attorney asked, scrolling through her phone. "Some big-shot lawyer's son inherited $8 million after his mother was declared incompetent. Lucky guy." My hands froze mid-motion. Westfield Heights was my old neighborhood, and $8 million was almost exactly what my estate had been worth. "Jasper Hernandez," she continued, "says here his mother had early cognitive issues and made reckless financial choices. He's using the inheritance to expand his consulting business." Hernandez. He had taken Lenny's last name. Of course he had. It made the trail harder to follow. "Smart move," the other attorney said. "Wish my family had that kind of money?" They laughed. I forced myself to keep mopping as my heart slammed against my ribs. Jasper wasn't just enjoying my stolen life, he was proudly displaying it. In print, framed as a devoted son who had rescued his mother from herself. "Elma, are you okay?" Marco asked quietly, appearing beside me. "You look pale." "Just tired," I said, realizing my grip on the mop handle had turned my knuckles white. "Take your lunch break," he said gently. That spot can wait." I nodded and headed to the break room, a small windowless space with flickering lights and an ancient coffee maker. I sat at the scratched table where the cleaning crew usually ate and tried to breathe. Jasper hadn't just taken my money, he had rewritten the story. In his version, I was unstable, incapable. He was the hero who stepped in just in time, and I had no proof to challenge it. I had run instead of fighting, leaving behind documents, contacts, and credibility. Anything he presented now would look convincing, and I had no resources to push back. My phone rang. The area code was from Westfield Heights. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello, Mom." Jasper's voice was perfectly measured, warm with concern. "Where are you? We've been so worried." "We?" As if Lenny had been pacing the floor instead of enjoying my money. "I'm fine," I said. "Please come home," he continued. "The place we found has excellent care. This running away isn't helping anyone." "I'm not coming back." "Mom, you're not well," he said softly. "I know you're scared and confused, but we can get through this together." The performance was flawless. Anyone overhearing would hear a loving son patiently guiding an unwell parent. "I'm not sick," I said, "and I'm not confused. I know exactly what you did." "What I did was protect you," he replied calmly. "The doctor warned this kind of suspicion is common with your condition." And in that moment, I understood something clearly. If I ever wanted my life back, or even my dignity, I couldn't confront him head-on. I would have to outlast him. And I would have to be smarter. "You're inventing stories because the truth hurts too much," he said smoothly. The precision of his manipulation was chilling. Any accusation I made could be brushed aside as a symptom of my so-called condition. Any resistance would be framed as proof that my mind was failing. When I didn't answer, he continued, voice gentle and concerned. "Where are you staying? Are you eating well? Are you taking your medications?" Medications. Another lie layered neatly into his narrative. I wondered what bottles he had placed in my old cabinet, what pharmacy records he had created to document treatments I'd never received. "I have to go," I said. "Mom, please." I ended the call and shut off my phone immediately. My hands shook so badly I struggled just to press the button. Jasper had found my number, which meant he was actively searching for me. The image of him and Lenny arriving in Millbrook with official papers and a fabricated medical history made my stomach twist. I went back to work early, desperate for the distraction of physical effort. The afternoon session at the courthouse had begun. I stationed myself in the hallway outside courtroom 3, organizing supplies while quietly listening. "Your Honor, the state calls its first witness in the matter of People v. Rodriguez." I knew this case. Everyone did. Miguel Rodriguez, 68 years old, accused of siphoning pension funds from the construction company where he'd worked most of his life. The evidence was thin, but District Attorney Thompson had a reputation for turning fragile cases into convincing victories. The defendant had exclusive access to the pension accounts, Thompson declared. Financial records show withdrawals totaling $400,000 over 18 months, aligning precisely with his gambling debts. Through the open door, I saw Rodriguez at the defense table. Small, worn down, hands marked by decades of labor. Beside him sat a court-appointed attorney who looked overwhelmed and far too new. "You expect this jury to believe," Thompson pressed, "that someone else accessed your secure system, used your personal credentials, and took money only you controlled?" "I don't know how it happened," Rodriguez said quietly. "I never took it. I worked my whole life for that pension." "And yet you owed $40,000 to illegal bookmakers," Thompson replied. "An unfortunate coincidence." The defense objected weakly. It didn't matter. I could see it in the jury's expressions. The story was simple, easy, convincing. They had already made up their minds. As I listened, something burned inside my chest. This was my story. Different details, same design. Circumstantial evidence shaped into a clean narrative. Motive assigned, character dismantled. Rodriguez was being pushed aside by a prosecutor chasing statistics. I was being erased by a son who had planned it for years. The difference was that Rodriguez had someone speaking for him, even if she was outmatched. I had no one, just a mop, a memory, and a growing resolve. That night, I sat alone in my tiny studio apartment. 2 rooms, $400 a month, and a kitchenette that always smelled like the restaurant downstairs. I stared at the only photograph I'd saved from my old life. Jasper, at 5 years old, grinning on Christmas morning as he hugged a stuffed dinosaur I'd given him. When had that child disappeared? When had love turned into calculation? I searched my memories for warning signs, but found only the ordinary challenges of raising a privileged child. Maybe that was the mistake. I had given him everything elite schools, expensive clothes, a car at 16, full tuition, graduate school, allowances that stretched well into adulthood. I wanted him to have what I never did. Instead, I taught him that my success belonged to him. The irony was unbearable. I had worked relentless weeks for decades, sacrificing friendships and happiness to build security for his future. In doing so, I had funded my own undoing. My phone buzzed. A text from the same number. "Mom, I hired a private investigator. Please call me before this gets worse." The message was clear. Jasper couldn't let me vanish. He needed me placed in that facility to complete his version of the story, the caring son, the unwell mother. As long as I was free, I was a risk. I deleted the message and stood in front of my bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different now. Thinner, stronger, worn down by work and pressure, but her eyes were sharper than they had been in months. For the first time since I ran, I didn't feel confused. I felt ready. For 6 months I had hidden inside that courthouse, pushing a mop and absorbing other people's legal disasters. I kept telling myself I was only surviving, buying time until I figured out what came next. But standing there, thinking about Miguel Rodriguez and a trial already decided, about Jasper's stolen millions and fabricated medical records, about the quiet injustice I witnessed every single day in those halls, something finally became clear to me. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was studying, and the very next day would prove exactly how much I had learned. An old man in an expensive suit was about to walk into courtroom 3, facing the most merciless prosecutor in the county, defended only by an overworked public defender. That was the moment everything would shift. That was when Elma the janitor would disappear, and something far more dangerous would take her place. None of them had any idea who had been cleaning their floors. He entered courtroom 3 precisely at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, and I knew instantly he didn't belong there, at least not in the defendant's seat. He was tall and composed, somewhere in his late 70s, with silver hair styled by a professional hand. His charcoal suit was flawless and clearly expensive, worth more than I earned in half a year. The leather briefcase beside him was worn in the way quality items are, aging gracefully instead of falling apart. Everything about him suggested influence and wealth, except for one thing. He was sitting alone while District Attorney Marcus Thompson prepared for yet another easy win. I parked my cleaning cart near the back of the courtroom, pretending to sort supplies while watching closely. The bailiff announced the case, People versus Henry Blackwood. Charges, financial fraud and elder abuse. The irony was almost unbearable. A 78-year-old man accused of abusing elders. "Where is your attorney, Mr. Blackwood?" Judge Patricia Wells asked, her voice carrying the weariness of 2 decades on the bench. "I dismissed him yesterday, Your Honor," Blackwood replied calmly. "I will represent myself." A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. Self-representation in serious criminal cases was rare. In a case carrying a possible 20-year sentence, it was almost unheard of. Thompson looked pleased. This was going to be effortless. "Your Honor, the state is ready to proceed," Thompson said smoothly. "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Wells warned, "I strongly suggest you reconsider. These charges carry severe consequences." "I understand," Blackwood said evenly. "I'm ready." The judge sighed and invited the prosecution to begin. I had seen Thompson perform before. He was polished, dramatic, and completely relentless. Watching him prepare to dismantle an elderly man without legal protection felt deeply wrong, like watching a trained fighter swing at someone defenseless. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Thompson began, his voice echoing confidently, "the defendant sits before you today as proof that greed does not fade with age." He laid out a story of betrayal and manipulation. According to him, Henry Blackwood had stolen $2.7 million from investors, many of them seniors who had trusted him with their retirement savings. Thompson described fake companies, forged paperwork, offshore accounts, and a lavish lifestyle funded by stolen money. He painted Blackwood as a charming predator who smiled while destroying lives. He drove luxury vehicles, traveled internationally, and purchased high-end property, Thompson said, while his victims struggled to pay for basic needs. The narrative was clean, emotional, and powerful. I watched the jurors nod along, absorbing every word. Thompson didn't just accuse Blackwood of fraud, he cast himself as a protector of grandparents, a defender of dignity. When he finished, Judge Wells turned to the defendant. "Mr. Blackwood, would you like to make an opening statement?" The old man rose slowly, buttoning his jacket with the ease of someone accustomed to standing before rooms full of people. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady, and carried without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "District Attorney Thompson has told you a story about greed and betrayal. It is compelling, simple, emotionally satisfying, and unfortunately it isn't true." I leaned forward despite myself. Most defendants who represented themselves were unstable or desperate. Henry Blackwood was neither. "The truth," he continued, "is more complicated than the version you've been given. Yes, I managed investments for many clients over 15 years. Yes, some investments failed, but the money did not end up in my pocket. It was taken by someone else, someone who used my reputation and trust to access client funds." His statement was brief, but precise. He didn't deny that money was missing. He didn't deny that people had suffered. He positioned himself not as the villain, but as another casualty. The first day unfolded exactly as Thompson intended. One witness after another took the stand, each story more painful than the last. Retired teachers who lost their pensions, widows who handed over insurance money from their late husbands, elderly couples facing foreclosure after trusting Blackwood with their savings. Then Mrs. Eleanor Hartley was wheeled forward. 82 years old, frail. She testified that she had invested her entire retirement fund, $350,000. "He said it was safe," she told the court. "He said it was guaranteed." Her voice shook. The courtroom went silent. Thompson had what he wanted: tears, sympathy, outrage. And as I stood there with my hands on a cleaning cart, watching the jury's hearts harden against the man at the defense table, I felt something settle inside me with absolute clarity. I had seen this before. I had lived it. And this time, I wasn't going to look away. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice barely above a whisper. "He promised my money would be safe? And where is that money now, Mrs. Hartley?" Thompson asked gently. "It's gone. All of it. I live on Social Security now, $800 a month. I had to sell my house." The impact was immediate. 2 jurors wiped away tears. Several others stared at Blackwood with open anger. This was Thompson's strength turning complex financial cases into raw human tragedy. When it was time for cross-examination, I expected Blackwood to falter. Most people who defended themselves either rambled or turned questioning into emotional speeches. Instead, he surprised me. "Mrs. Hartley," he said softly, "I am deeply sorry for what you lost. You trusted me, and I failed to protect your investment. That's something I will always regret." It wasn't a question, but Judge Wells allowed it. Blackwood was doing something very deliberate, accepting moral responsibility without admitting legal guilt. It took skill to walk that line. "You invested in something called the Meridian Growth Fund, correct?" he continued. "Yes," she said. "Do you remember signing the investment paperwork?" "Yes, you had it in your office." "And do you recall who handled the daily operations of that fund?" Mrs. Hartley hesitated. "Well, you did, didn't you?" Actually, no, Blackwood replied calmly. The fund was operated by Meridian Investment Services. I acted as the broker who introduced clients to the fund managers. Do you remember meeting a man named David Meridian? I think so, she said slowly. There was another man there sometimes. I know this is difficult, Blackwood said gently, but it matters. When you invested, did I ever guarantee that you could not lose money? You said it was very safe, she answered, but did I say it was impossible to lose money? She paused, clearly uncertain. I don't remember exactly. I felt my pulse quicken. Blackwood was good, very good. He wasn't attacking the witnesses or denying their losses. He was quietly shifting the question from emotion to responsibility. Over the next 2 days, the pattern held. Thompson methodically built his case bank records, signatures, transaction histories, corporate documents. On the surface, it looked overwhelming, but Blackwood never challenged the paperwork itself. Instead, he returned to one central point over and over again. Who actually controlled the money? By Thursday afternoon, I finally saw the shape of his strategy. He wasn't denying that funds vanished. He was arguing that someone else, this elusive David Meridian, had orchestrated the scheme. Blackwood was positioning himself as another victim, someone whose reputation had been used as cover. It was a dangerous approach. If he couldn't prove Meridian existed and had real control, the jury would assume he was inventing a story to save himself. Thompson, however, seemed unconcerned. During a break, I overheard him speaking confidently to his assistant in the hallway. Let him invent this Meridian character, Thompson said with a smile. We've checked everything. No David Meridian tied to these companies. It's a fantasy, and the jury will see that. I kept mopping, but my thoughts raced. If Thompson was right, Blackwood was finished. Yet nothing about the old man felt desperate or confused. He spoke like someone who knew something important and was waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Friday morning brought the final blow from the prosecution. Federal investigators and forensic accountants laid out the money trail in meticulous detail. According to their analysis, every dollar of the missing $2.7 million eventually ended up in accounts linked to Blackwood-owned companies. The trail is clear, Agent Rebecca Morrison testified. Funds moved from victim accounts into the Meridian Growth Fund, then through a network of shell entities, before landing in accounts tied to Blackwood Enterprises. It sounded definitive. The jury looked convinced. Then Blackwood stood again. Agent Morrison, he said calmly, you mentioned these transfers were electronic. Do your records show who physically initiated them? The transactions were authorized using your digital credentials, Morrison replied. But do you have proof that I personally executed them? He asked. Video footage, keystroke logs, location data, anything showing I was present when those transfers occurred? For the first time all week, Morrison hesitated. And standing there behind my cleaning cart, watching the smallest crack appear in Thompson's perfect case, I felt something shift deep inside me. This wasn't just about Henry Blackwood anymore. This was a lesson. And I was paying very close attention. The transfers were authorized using your credentials, sir. That's how digital security works, Agent Morrison replied. But anyone with access to those credentials could have initiated them, correct? Blackwood asked calmly. She hesitated. In theory, yes. Thank you, Agent Morrison. It was a small moment, but it mattered. I saw it land with at least a few jurors. For the first time, the idea took hold that someone else could have used Blackwood's access to move the money. The prosecution rested late Friday afternoon, and Judge Wells scheduled closing arguments for Monday morning. Over the weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about the case. Blackwood's situation felt painfully familiar, an older person being dismantled piece by someone he had trusted. Monday arrived cold and gray, the rain matching the heaviness in my chest as I rolled my cleaning cart into courtroom 3. Thompson's closing argument was flawless, emotional, confident, relentless. Henry Blackwood wants you to believe he's the victim, he said. He wants you to accept that a mysterious man, someone no one can find, identify, or confirm ever existed, somehow stole $2.7 million, leaving Mr. Blackwood blameless. That isn't reasonable doubt. That's imagination. When Thompson sat down, the room was silent except for Mrs. Hartley quietly crying in the gallery. The jury looked convinced. And honestly, I understood why. Then Henry Blackwood stood. Something in his posture told me he wasn't finished. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, steady and clear, "the district attorney is correct about one thing. My defense depends entirely on David Meridian. If I can't prove he existed, then I am responsible for taking money from people who trusted me." He walked to the evidence table and picked up a thick manila folder I hadn't noticed before. "But what if I can prove it?" He opened the folder and removed a stack of photographs. "These are surveillance images from my office building," he continued. "They were taken over a 15-month period by the building's security company. They show a man meeting regularly with my clients, a man who had access to my office and my computer systems." I stopped pretending to clean. The photos were clear. They showed Blackwood with various elderly clients, but also a younger man, likely in his 40s, present at many of those meetings. "This," Blackwood said, holding up one image, "is David Meridian. These photographs show that he existed, that he interacted with my clients, and that he was present during key investment discussions." Thompson was on his feet instantly. "Objection, Your Honor. This material wasn't disclosed earlier. The defense can't introduce new evidence during closing arguments." "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Wells said sharply, "this evidence should have been presented during your case." "Your Honor," Blackwood replied evenly, "I only received these photographs Friday afternoon. The security company stored them in archived files that required specialist recovery." It sounded reasonable, but the judge remained cautious. "The prosecution has the right to review this evidence and respond," she said. "I'm calling a recess while we address this." As Judge Wells left the bench with both attorneys, the courtroom buzzed quietly. I watched Henry Blackwood remain seated, calm and focused, reviewing his notes as if nothing unexpected had happened. That bothered me. He wasn't relieved. He wasn't nervous. He looked prepared. People who fabricate stories usually show cracks under pressure. Blackwood showed none. And if David Meridian truly existed, why hadn't this evidence appeared sooner? After nearly an hour, Judge Wells returned. "Mr. Blackwood, I will allow this evidence," she announced. "The prosecution will have an opportunity to respond. We will resume tomorrow morning." As the courtroom emptied, I stayed near my cart, watching Blackwood pack his briefcase. His movements were efficient, controlled. His hands didn't shake. Then he looked up. Our eyes met. "You're not really a janitor, are you?" he asked quietly. My heart skipped. In 6 months of hiding in plain sight, no one had ever looked past the uniform. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said carefully. "You've followed this case more closely than most attorneys," he replied. "You understand what's happening here, and unless I'm mistaken, you've been taking notes." I glanced down. I had been scribbling observations on the backs of supply receipts without even realizing it. "I just find legal cases interesting," I said. "So do I," Blackwood replied, stepping closer. "And I find it especially interesting when someone with clear legal training chooses to clean courtrooms instead of practicing law." The air between us felt charged, dangerous. "What makes you think I have legal training?" I asked. "Because you're the only person in this room who truly understands what I'm doing," he said. Something in his voice told me this wasn't guesswork. Henry Blackwood knew exactly who David Meridian was, and whatever was going to happen tomorrow, it was going to change everything. But as I watched him leave the courtroom, briefcase in hand, posture unbroken despite the possibility of 20 years behind bars, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of something far bigger than a routine fraud case. There was more to Henry Blackwood than the story being told in court. Tuesday morning arrived heavy with tension, the kind that makes veteran court reporters double-check their recorders and bailiffs position themselves carefully around the room. I showed up an hour early, officially to clean, but really to replay his words from the day before. "You're not really a janitor, are you?" The question had followed me through a sleepless night. For 6 months I had believed my cover was flawless, yet Blackwood had seen through it in less than a week. If he could do that so easily, How long before someone else did? How long before Jasper's investigator traced me to Millbrook? I was rearranging my supplies for the third time when Blackwood walked in at 7:45 a.m., a full 90 minutes before court was scheduled to begin. He looked untouched by the circumstances, suit perfectly pressed, silver hair neat, briefcase in hand like a man arriving at his own office rather than facing decades of confinement. "Good morning," he said, as he passed me near the gallery rail. "I was hoping you'd be here." I checked the room. Empty. "Mr. Blackwood, we shouldn't be talking," I said quietly. "Why?" he asked. "Because you're staff and I'm a defendant, or because you're hiding and don't want attention?" The directness knocked the air out of me. "I'm not hiding from anyone." "Of course not," he replied calmly. "That's why someone with your clear legal background earns $11 an hour mopping floors. That's why you take detailed notes during testimony. That's why you tense up whenever someone mentions private investigators or family betrayal." He had been watching me far more closely than I realized. "What do you want?" I asked. "To offer you a job," he said. "And to tell you who I really am." Before I could respond, he opened his briefcase and removed a silver card holder. The card he handed me was thick, cream-colored, with raised lettering that spoke of real money: Henry Blackwood, Chairman and CEO, Blackwood Media Group. My mind raced. Blackwood Media Group was massive newspapers, television stations, digital platforms across a dozen states. "You're him," I whispered. "You're actually Henry Blackwood." "I am," he said evenly. "Which makes this prosecution rather interesting, don't you think? Why would someone worth $800 million steal $2.7 million from retirees?" He didn't need an answer. The question itself explained everything. "Someone set you up," I realized aloud. "Someone who knew you handled small personal investments for longtime friends. Someone with access to your systems. Someone who knew your reputation would make you the perfect target." "David Meridian," he said. "He's real, but that isn't his name. His real name is David Martinez. Until 8 months ago, he was my director of financial operations." The pieces snapped together. Martinez had access to everything: business systems, personal accounts, client data. He had rerouted funds and left a trail pointing straight to Blackwood. When the theft surfaced, Martinez vanished, and Blackwood looked guilty. "Why didn't your attorney expose this?" I asked. "Because my attorney," Blackwood said quietly, "is Martinez's brother-in-law. Carlos Mendoza, a respected defense attorney. Someone Blackwood trusted completely. He assured me the evidence against Martinez was weak," Blackwood continued. "He pushed me to focus on reasonable doubt instead." The betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined. Martinez hadn't just stolen the money, he'd ensured Blackwood was defended by someone invested in his downfall. "That's why you fired him," I said, "and represented yourself." "I uncovered the family connection 3 days ago," Blackwood said. "Marriage records. Everything suddenly made sense." "But you still don't have proof Martinez took the money," I said carefully. "Not yet," he replied. "But I have something better." My heart skipped. "Better than proof?" "I have David Martinez himself." I stared at him. "You have him where?" "In federal custody," Blackwood said calmly. "Los Angeles." And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just his fight anymore. He was arrested 2 weeks ago for running a nearly identical investment scheme under a different name. The federal investigators don't yet realize he's the same person who emptied my client's accounts. The implications hit me all at once. If Henry Blackwood could prove that David Martinez and David Meridian were the same man, and that Martinez had been running identical scams under multiple identities, it wouldn't just clear Blackwood, it would expose a much larger operation that had already ruined lives. "Why are you telling me all this?" I asked. "Because I need a lawyer I can trust," he said simply. "And you're the only one in this building who isn't tied to the local legal circle. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, even judges, they're all part of a system Martinez has been exploiting for months." "I'm not a lawyer," I said. "I'm a janitor." "You were a lawyer," he replied calmly. "A very good one, from what I can tell. Something happened to you. family betrayal, financial manipulation. If I'm reading the signs correctly, you've been hiding, but you never stopped thinking like an attorney." The conversation felt unreal. One of the most powerful media executives in the country, facing serious charges, was offering me work because he'd watched me clean floors. "Even if I were still practicing," I said, "my license isn't active in this state. I couldn't represent you." "You could," he answered. "Temporary admission in a specific case is possible with the right sponsorship, and I know judges who would approve it." The pull was almost physical. For 6 months, I had been invisible, powerless, forgotten. This was a chance to use my mind again, to matter, to reclaim the part of myself Jasper had taken. "What exactly are you asking?" I said. "I want your help exposing David Martinez," Blackwood replied, "and in return, I'll help you recover what was taken from you. My company has investigative resources most agencies can only dream of. We can uncover records, trace money, prove patterns. Whatever was done to you, we can bring it into the light." The offer was both tempting and terrifying. "You don't even know my full story," I said. "I know enough," he replied. "You were successful. You were betrayed by family. You're intelligent, principled, and angry enough to risk everything for the truth. That's all I need." He reached into his briefcase again and handed me a thick folder. "These are federal reports from Martinez's arrest in Los Angeles. Fingerprints, photos, criminal history." I opened it and stared at booking photos of a man in his early 40s, with sharp eyes and an expression that radiated calculation. According to the report, he had operated scams in multiple states under at least 4 different names. "This proves he exists," I said, "and that he's a career criminal. But how does it prove he stole from your clients?" "Turn to page 7. I flipped to a forensic analysis. The details were technical, but the pattern was unmistakable. Martinez used advanced software to access legitimate financial systems, redirect funds, and leave behind digital trails pointing to his superiors. "He's done this before," Blackwood said quietly. "At least 6 times in 4 years. He targets older executives who manage small investment accounts as favors. He gains access as a trusted employee, moves the money, then disappears." "How many people?" I asked. 4 are currently serving sentences for crimes he committed. 2 others passed away while waiting for trial. I'm the first one who uncovered the pattern." The scale of it left me stunned. Martinez wasn't just stealing money. He was systematically destroying people. "Why hasn't this been connected?" I asked. "Different names, different states, different prosecutors," Blackwood replied. "Everyone sees a single case. No one sees the whole picture. The federal investigators are focused on his latest scheme, not the damage behind him." "But you saw it." "I had the resources," he said. "When I realized my own attorney couldn't be trusted, I started digging myself. Court was set to begin in 15 minutes, but time seemed to stall as I absorbed what was in front of me. David Martinez wasn't just clever, he was a predator, deliberately choosing people whose reputations could be turned against them. "Mr. Blackwood," I said finally, "even if everything you've shown me is true, revealing it today won't be enough." He studied me closely. "Go on." "You don't just need to introduce evidence," I continued. "You need to control the narrative. You need to connect the cases, expose the pattern, and do it in a way the jury can understand. Otherwise, this will look like desperation." A slow smile crossed his face. "Exactly," he said. "That's why I need you." And in that moment, standing there in a courthouse supply room with a mop at my feet and a life-changing decision in front of me, I realized something undeniable. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was being recruited. The prosecution will say it doesn't matter, that none of this changes the charges you're facing right now. They'll argue it's irrelevant. You need time to investigate the connections properly and build arguments that can't be brushed aside. And that's why you need someone who understands complex financial fraud and isn't tied to the local legal circle. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to gain by telling the truth. People were beginning to enter the courtroom. Court reporters took their seats. Bailiffs moved into position. A few early spectators filtered in. Our chance to speak privately was slipping away. "I need time to think," I said. Of course, Blackwood replied. But think about this while you do. David Martinez destroyed your life too, didn't he? The question landed with unsettling precision. Maybe not directly, he continued, but someone followed his method. They gained your trust, accessed your financial systems, drained your assets, and built a story that made you look irresponsible or worse. The accuracy was chilling. Jasper had done exactly that. He used the power of attorney I gave him, emptied my accounts, and rewrote the narrative until I looked unfit to manage my own life. How did you know? I asked. Because it's the same pattern, Blackwood said. Target successful people who trust family or close associates, gain legitimate access, steal slowly and carefully, build documentation that makes the victim appear at fault. When it's discovered, the wrong person looks guilty and the real culprit disappears. You think there's a connection between Martinez and what happened to me? I think Martinez teaches this, Blackwood said quietly. I think he trains others to destroy families from the inside while protecting themselves with believable cover stories. The idea that Jasper's betrayal might not have been random, that he could have learned this from someone like Martinez, ignited a fury I hadn't felt in months. Even if that's true, I said, I can't prove it. I ran. I left everything behind. But I didn't. Blackwood replied, help me expose Martinez, and we'll use the same tools to uncover what was done to you. This isn't just about my case, it's about stopping something that ruins lives for profit. At that moment, District Attorney Thompson entered the courtroom with his assistant, followed by several federal agents. The session was about to begin. I needed to move back to my cart. What do you need from me right now? I asked. Watch carefully, Blackwood said. I'm going to introduce the Martinez evidence. Thompson will fight it. But watch the federal agents' faces when they see the fingerprints and criminal history. They'll recognize the pattern, even if the prosecution doesn't. Then we'll see whether the system can face the truth or whether it's too invested in the story it's already told. As I pushed my cart toward the back of the room, my thoughts raced. For 6 months, I had accepted that I was just a victim of family betrayal. But if Blackwood was right, Jasper's actions might have been part of something much larger. The idea of fighting back, of using my skills again, of reclaiming my name was intoxicating and terrifying. Stepping out of hiding meant exposure. It meant confronting Jasper's lies. It meant accepting that my son might be more than selfish. He might be dangerous. When Judge Wells called the court to order, I understood that everything was about to change. In a matter of hours, Henry Blackwood would either be cleared or condemned, and depending on that outcome, I would either remain invisible or become myself again. Watching Blackwood stand at the defense table, calm and certain, I realized I had already chosen. He wasn't the only one who had been systematically destroyed by someone he trusted, and David Martinez was about to learn that his victims were done staying silent. 3 weeks after Henry Blackwood was cleared of all charges, I stood inside the law library at Blackwood Media Group's headquarters, surrounded by more resources than I had ever imagined. From the 42nd floor, the city stretched endlessly below, but my focus was on the documents spread across the long mahogany table. They weren't about Henry anymore. They were about my son. The morning Henry presented the Martinez evidence had changed everything. When Agent Rebecca Morrison matched the fingerprints from the Los Angeles arrest to the security footage from Henry's office, the color drained from her face. The identities aligned perfectly. The records confirmed it, identical methods, identical crimes, across multiple states. Thompson fought hard to keep his case alive, insisting that Martinez's other offenses didn't automatically prove Henry's innocence. But the narrative had collapsed. The truth was bigger than one courtroom, one charge, one defendant. And now, for the first time since my life fell apart, I was no longer cleaning up the aftermath. I was building a case, one that would finally expose the truth about who had betrayed me and why. But when Henry's investigators produced bank records showing that Martinez had used the stolen funds to buy property under yet another false identity, doubt turned into certainty. The jury needed less than 4 hours to return a not guilty verdict on every charge. Henry was cleared, but that was only the beginning. True to his word, he immediately redirected his investigative team toward uncovering what had really happened to me. What we found was both more disturbing and more relieving than I could have imagined. "Alma, you need to see this," Janet Morrison called from across the library. Janet was one of Henry's senior investigators, a former federal agent who now specialized in complex financial crimes. Her experience had been critical in tracing the links between Martinez and my son. I walked over to her station, where 3 monitors glowed with financial records, communication logs, and surveillance images. "What did you find?" I asked. "Your son attended a seminar 18 months ago," she said. "It was called Family Wealth Management and Elder Care Planning. It was marketed as a legitimate financial workshop, but look at who ran it." On the center screen was a photograph of the presenter, David Martinez. At the time, he'd been using the name David Morgan. The seminar materials promised to teach participants how to protect family assets from poor decision-making by aging relatives. My stomach tightened as everything fell into place. Martinez hadn't just been stealing money, he had been teaching others how to do it. "It gets worse," Janet continued. "We identified 23 attendees. 11 of them later obtained power of attorney over elderly relatives' finances. 9 of those relatives were then declared incompetent or placed into care facilities under questionable circumstances." The scale of it was staggering. Martinez hadn't only committed fraud himself, he had built a system that trained people to dismantle their own families while hiding behind legal paperwork. "Does that mean Jasper worked directly with Martinez?" I asked. Janet brought up another screen filled with transaction data. "Not directly. Martinez was careful. He taught techniques, not partnerships. That way, every case looked like an isolated family conflict instead of part of a coordinated scheme. But Jasper followed the method," she continued. "Fake medical records, gradual isolation from professional contacts, systematic liquidation of assets, placement into a care facility. It's almost a perfect match to what Martinez taught." I stared at the evidence, feeling both vindicated and sickened. For months, I had questioned my own memory, my judgment, my sanity. Every doubt had been carefully planted. "What about the money?" I asked. "Can we trace it?" "That's the good news," Henry said, entering the library with his own stack of documents. "Your son learned Martinez's psychological tactics," he said, laying papers across the table, "but he didn't learn his financial discipline. The money trail is painfully clear." Henry pointed to the figures. "Your estate was worth about $8.2 million. Jasper liquidated $6.8 million over 18 months. But instead of hiding it offshore or using shell companies, he transferred it straight into accounts in his and Lenny's names. He hadn't even tried to conceal it. Worse," Henry added, "he used the funds to buy assets that are extremely easy to track." Janet pulled up photos on the screen: a downtown penthouse worth over $1 million, 2 luxury vehicles totaling $150,000, designer furniture and artwork valued in the hundreds of thousands. "The irony," Henry said calmly, "is that Jasper documented everything: receipts, insurance, tax filings. He was so confident that the power of attorney protected him that he never bothered covering his tracks." I felt a slow, unexpected sense of satisfaction. For months, Jasper had lived comfortably off what I built, convinced I was helpless or forgotten. "Can we recover it?" I asked. "Most of it," Henry replied. "I've already filed motions to freeze his accounts and assets. By the end of the week, he won't be able to sell, transfer, or spend anything without court approval." The image of Jasper suddenly cut off, unable to access the lifestyle he'd stolen, was more powerful than I'd expected. "And criminal charges?" I asked. Henry smiled. "That's where things get interesting." That was the moment I was reminded why Henry Blackwood had become so powerful in the media world. Jasper hadn't just stolen from me, he had used methods taught by a documented criminal network. That made his actions part of a much larger federal case tied directly to Martinez's operation, and the federal authorities were very interested in everyone who had attended those seminars and then gone on to defraud family members. "You mean this won't stay at the state level?" I asked. "Not even close," Henry replied. "This brings federal charges: conspiracy, wire fraud, and exploitation of vulnerable adults. Jasper could be facing 15 to 20 years, plus full restitution. The scale of what Henry had achieved in just 3 weeks was staggering. He hadn't only cleared his own name and dismantled Martinez's network, he had built an airtight case against my son that would hold up under the harshest scrutiny. "There's more," Janet said, pulling up another file. "While tracing your son's finances, we uncovered something else. His wife has been involved with Martinez's former business partner. They've been planning to disappear together once things cooled down, taking whatever money they could access." The irony was almost poetic. Jasper had betrayed me for money, and now his wife was preparing to betray him for the same reason. "Do they know we're investigating?" I asked. "No," Janet said. "We've been careful. As far as Jasper knows, you're still missing. He believes his theft is undiscovered." Henry stood by the windows overlooking the city. Somewhere below, Jasper was living comfortably in a penthouse bought with stolen money, convinced he was untouchable. "Elma," Henry said quietly, "this isn't just about getting your money back or holding your son accountable. Martinez's operation has destroyed hundreds of families. Parents who trusted their children were stripped of everything and discarded. If we expose this, we stop it from happening again." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "I need you to step into the open," he said. "The evidence is strong, but prosecutors will want testimony. That means explaining why you disappeared. That means facing your son and dismantling his story in public." The idea of sitting across from Jasper again, listening to him insist I was incapable, confused, unfit sent a jolt of fear through me. But beneath it was something else: anticipation. "For 6 months I ran," I said. "Now you're offering me the chance to end this." "When do we start?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," Henry replied. "I've arranged a meeting with the federal prosecutor leading the Martinez case. She's willing to offer Jasper a deal if he cooperates. If not, full prosecution." Then Henry paused. "There's something else you should know. The prosecutor is someone from your past." The name hit me instantly. Maria Santos. She had been a rising star when I was still practicing, brilliant, relentless, deeply committed to prosecuting financial crimes, especially those involving family betrayal. If Maria was leading this case, Jasper was in real danger. "She'll go after this aggressively," Henry said, "especially once she sees the full scope of Martinez's network." That night, I returned to my small apartment, knowing it would likely be my last. What had once felt like a refuge now felt temporary, a reminder of how far I had fallen. But as I sat at the kitchen table reviewing the evidence that would finally expose the truth, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. For the first time since Jasper betrayed me, I wasn't reacting, I was setting the terms. My phone rang. Jasper's name lit up the screen. The first call in weeks. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Jasper." "Mom, where are you? I've been so worried." The concern in his voice no longer fooled me. I knew the performance. "I'm safe," I said calmly. "Thank God," he replied. "Mom, you need to come home. The doctors warned us you might get confused. Forget how to take care of yourself." "I remember everything," I said, "including what you did to me." Silence. When he spoke again, the warmth was gone. "Mom, you're not well," he said coldly. "You're imagining things, creating stories. That's part of your condition." "My condition?" I asked. "The dementia," he said. And in that moment, I knew this conversation. This lie was the last one he would ever control. "Mom, we've already talked about this," Jasper insisted. "You signed the power of attorney because you were starting to forget things. You were making bad financial choices. I was protecting you." Even then, wrapped tightly in his own lies, he clung to the story. He truly believed the fake medical reports and forged paperwork would shield him from consequences. "Jasper," I said calmly, "I want you to know something. Tomorrow morning, federal agents will arrest you for conspiracy, wire fraud, and abuse of a vulnerable adult. They will freeze every asset you control and begin recovering every dollar you took from me." Silence. Longer this time. That's impossible, he finally said. You have no proof. You ran because you were confused and scared. No one will take your word over medical records. I don't need anyone to believe my word, I replied. I have bank records, surveillance footage, and testimony from the man who taught you how to dismantle your own mother. Another sharp pause. David Martinez is cooperating with federal investigators, I continued. He's trading information for a reduced sentence. I heard his breath catch. The name clearly landed. I don't know anyone by that name, he said quickly. The seminar you attended 18 months ago, I said. Family wealth management and elder care planning. Every tactic you used on me came straight from a career criminal who trained people to steal from their own families. You're making this up, he snapped. You're not well. By noon tomorrow, I said evenly, you'll be in federal custody. Your penthouse will be seized. Your cars will be impounded. Every asset bought with my money will be frozen for restitution. Then I added, Lenny may want to rethink her travel plans. That broke something. What travel plans? He demanded. What are you talking about? Ask her about Martinez's former business partner, I said. Ask her about the accounts in the Cayman Islands. Ask her why she's been researching countries without extradition treaties. You're lying, he said, though his voice lacked certainty. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe you're about to find out you weren't the only one planning to disappear with stolen money. I ended the call and shut off my phone. By then, Jasper was likely calling Lenny, demanding answers. If I was lucky, their panic would give investigators even more evidence. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Justice was finally beginning. Not the dramatic revenge I once imagined, but something far more solid. The careful exposure of truth, the return of what had been taken. Jasper had taught me how deeply family betrayal could cut. But Henry Blackwood had shown me something just as important. Family can also be chosen. And sometimes, the people who stand beside you when everything collapses are worth more than those who tried to destroy you for money. Everything you took will be returned, I thought as sleep finally came, and this time, you'll face the consequences. 8 months after my son's arrest, I stood in the doorway of my new law office, watching morning light pour through east-facing windows. The brass nameplate beside the door read, Alma Rodriguez, Attorney at Law Family Protection Services. Every time I saw it, I felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with purpose. The federal cases against Jasper and 17 others tied to the Martinez network had concluded 6 weeks earlier. Jasper was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to make full restitution. His refusal to cooperate had sealed that outcome. Lenny was arrested while attempting to board a flight to Costa Rica with $230,000 in cash and now faced charges of her own. I recovered $4.2 million of the $8.2 million Jasper had taken. The rest had vanished into expenses that couldn't be reclaimed. Trips, luxury purchases, money already burned. It was enough to rebuild my life, though nothing could erase the cost of his betrayal. Sitting across from my client, Mrs. Dorothy Hayward, I understood something clearly. The money had never been the real issue. Trust was, family was, and the damage that comes when people decide you're worth more to them diminished than independent. My grandson has been asking about my will again, Mrs. Hayward said, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted her teacup. He says he wants to help me manage my finances. He thinks I should give him power of attorney just to keep me from making mistakes. The words sent a chill through me. They were almost identical to what Jasper had once said. How old is your grandson? I asked gently. 34, she replied. He's been out of work for 6 months. Says the economy is impossible for young people. He's staying with me to help. But mostly he brings women over and leaves a mess. And when did these conversations about your finances begin? I asked. Right after his girlfriend moved in, she said. She keeps talking about how unfair it is that older people have money while young people struggle. I nodded slowly. Mrs. Hayward didn't realize it yet, but I recognized the pattern instantly. And this time, someone was finally there to stop it before it was too late. The pattern was becoming painfully familiar. Since opening my practice, I had handled 12 similar cases, each one involving a younger relative who suddenly took an intense interest in an older family member's finances. The details changed, but the strategy was always the same. "Mrs. Hayward," I said gently, "there's something important I want you to understand. People who truly care about your well-being don't need power of attorney to help you. They help because they love you, not because they want control." "But Tommy says I'm getting forgetful," she replied, "that I might start making bad decisions with my money." "Have you been making bad decisions?" I asked. She paused, thinking carefully. "No. I balance my checkbook every month. I pay my bills on time. I have enough savings to live comfortably for the rest of my life." "But Tommy says that could change if you get sick or confused," she continued. "He says I should put my accounts in his name now, just in case. That way the money will be protected." Protected for whom, I thought but didn't say. Instead, I opened her file and reviewed the financial summary my team had prepared. Her savings totaled $670,000, enough to attract a predator like Tommy, but not enough to survive a long legal battle if she waited too long. "Mrs. Hayward," I said, "would you like to hear about options that protect your finances without giving up control?" Her relief was immediate. "Yes, please. I love Tommy, but something about this feels wrong." Over the next hour, I walked her through safer alternative structures that protected assets while preserving independence. Tools designed to prevent abuse, not enable it. Each option put oversight and safeguards in place without stripping her of dignity. "The most important thing," I concluded, "is that there's no rush. Despite what Tommy may be saying, there is no emergency that requires you to hand over control of your life savings." "What if he gets angry when I tell him I'm not ready?" she asked softly. "Then you'll have your answer," I said. "People who truly care will respect your need to move carefully." After Mrs. Hayward left, I spent the rest of the morning reviewing case files. 13 active matters involving financial exploitation, 7 cases where we had stopped the theft before it began, 4 where money had already been taken and criminal referrals were underway. The work was exhausting but meaningful. Every client who kept their independence felt like a small victory against the system that had nearly destroyed me. Every referral was one more step toward accountability for people who treated their parents and grandparents like personal bank accounts instead of human beings. My phone rang. The number on the screen made my breath catch. Federal Correctional Facility. "This is a collect call from federal inmate Jasper Hernandez. Will you accept the charges?" I hesitated, then accepted. "Mom." His voice sounded different, smaller. The arrogance was gone. "Thank you for taking my call," he said quietly. "What do you want, Jasper?" "I wanted to tell you I'm sorry," he said. "Not because I was caught, not because I'm here, but because I hurt you, because I betrayed someone who loved me without conditions." I had imagined hearing those words for months. Now that they were real, they felt strangely hollow. "Why now?" I asked. "I've been in therapy," he said. "The prison psychologist helped me understand what I did and why. I know this doesn't undo anything, but I needed you to know I finally see it." "And what do you see now?" I asked. "That I convinced myself you owed me everything just because you were my mother," he said. "That I treated your success like something I deserved instead of something you earned." For the first time since this began, he wasn't performing. He was admitting the truth. "I turned you into an obstacle to my happiness," he said quietly, "instead of seeing you as the person who gave me every chance I ever had." His insight was accurate, maybe even sincere. But it had arrived far too late to change anything. "Jasper," I said, "I'm glad you're getting help. But an apology doesn't undo what you did." "I know," he replied. "I destroyed your trust. I stole from you. I tried to have you locked away. I ruined your life because I was too selfish to build my own." "You didn't ruin my life," I said calmly. "You changed it in ways I never expected, but you didn't ruin it." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" I looked around my office. The files on my desk, the names of people I had protected, the career I had rebuilt from nothing. I mean that losing everything forced me to discover who I actually am, I said. I spent 30 years building wealth and status, but I didn't understand my purpose until it was all taken from me and I had to start over. So, you're okay? He asked cautiously. I'm more than okay, I replied. I'm doing work that matters. I'm helping people who are vulnerable. I'm protecting families instead of just chasing money. In a strange way, your betrayal pushed me toward the most meaningful work of my life. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Does that mean you forgive me? He asked. The question I had rehearsed for months finally arrived, and my answer surprised even me. No, I said. I don't forgive you. What you did was unforgivable, but I don't hate you anymore either. Hatred takes energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. What happens now? He asked. Now you serve your sentence and decide who you want to be when you get out, I said, and I keep helping people avoid what you did to me. Will you ever want to see me again? I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday, if enough time passes and you prove your change is real, not convenient. But that's a question for the future, not today. I understand, he said. I know this probably means nothing coming from me, but I'm proud of what you've built. I paused. How do you know about that? The newspaper, he said. They wrote about your practice. They call you the guardian attorney, the one who protects older people from their own families. I hadn't realized how much attention my work was getting, but it made sense. Henry's media outlets had been covering cases of financial exploitation extensively, using their reach to expose a problem that had thrived in silence for too long. I have to go, Jasper, I said. I have clients who need me. Thank you for taking my call, he replied quietly. Goodbye, Jasper. I ended the call feeling drained but calm. The conversation had given me something I didn't know I needed. Closure, not forgiveness, but clarity. I didn't need reconciliation to move forward. That evening, I met Henry for dinner at our usual quiet restaurant downtown, a place where we could talk freely. Over time, he had become something like a mentor and an ally, someone who understood what it meant to rebuild a life after betrayal. How are you feeling after the call? He asked, cutting into his salmon with practiced precision. Relieved, I said. I spent months wondering if he'd ever understand what he did. Now I know he does, and somehow that matters less than I thought it would. Forgiveness is overrated, Henry said flatly. Understanding matters more. Justice matters more. Is that what we have? I asked. Justice? Henry gestured subtly around us. You're practicing law again. You're protecting people who need it. Jasper is paying for his crimes. Martinez's network is dismantled. Dozens of families are safer because of what you've done. If that isn't justice, it's close enough. I thought about Mrs. Hayward, about the relief in her eyes when she realized she didn't have to choose between family loyalty and financial safety, about every case where the cycle of abuse had been stopped before it destroyed another life. You know what the strangest part is? I said quietly. Henry looked up. I never set out to get revenge, I continued. I just wanted my life back. But in rebuilding it, I ended up creating something far better than what I lost. And for the first time in a very long while, I knew that was enough. I said, I'm happier now than I ever was before. When I had millions and a thriving firm, I was successful but not truly fulfilled. Now I have less money and far more purpose. Money is a tool, not the destination. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand that. I paused, then asked, What about you? Do you ever regret getting involved in my situation? Henry smiled, the rare kind that softened his usually serious expression. Elma, you saved my life too. If you hadn't stood up in that courtroom, I would have spent the rest of my life behind bars for something I didn't do. We didn't just help each other, we rescued each other. After dinner, I drove home to my modest but comfortable townhouse, chosen for safety rather than status. As I pulled into the driveway, the motion lights came on, illuminating the small garden I had planted the previous spring. The roses were in bloom now, their red petals glowing even under artificial light. They reminded me of the garden I lost when my old life collapsed, but these roses were different. I had planted them myself, in soil I prepared with my own hands, supported by a life I rebuilt from nothing. Inside, I poured a glass of wine and settled into my chair with the files for tomorrow's meetings. Mrs. Hayward's grandson, Tommy, had called her 3 times since our last conversation, each call more urgent than the last about signing power of attorney papers. Tomorrow, I would help her understand that urgency itself was the warning sign. As I worked, a realization settled in, one that would have shocked the woman who fled her mansion 8 months earlier. I was content. Not carefree, not untouched by pain, but grounded, the kind of peace that comes from surviving the worst and discovering your own strength. My phone rang once more before bed. It was Henry, with an update. The FBI wants to expand the Martinez investigation nationwide. They believe similar operations exist in other states, possibly connected. More families hurt by people they trusted and more families we can protect. Would you be interested in consulting at a national level? I thought about older adults across the country facing the same schemes that nearly destroyed my life. Yes, I said, but I want to keep my local practice too. The people here need protection just as much. Of course, Henry replied, and thank you for everything you've done. You turned your worst experience into something that saves others. After the call, I sat quietly, watching the roses sway outside my window. 8 months ago, I was hiding from my own son. Tonight, I was an attorney helping others avoid the same fate. The healing wasn't perfect. I still mourned the trust I once gave so freely. I still felt moments of grief for a relationship that could never be repaired. But I had learned something essential through loss. Sometimes the greatest answer isn't punishment, it's proving that what tried to break you actually made you stronger. Tomorrow, I would help Mrs. Hayward protect herself. Next week, I would testify before lawmakers about financial exploitation. Next month, I would work with Henry to expose another network of family predators. And in all of it, I would honor the lesson my son taught me without meaning to. True success isn't measured by what you collect, it's measured by what you protect. For the first time in a long while, I understood what real peace felt like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose, something no one could take away. Now, I'm curious about you. If you were in my place, what would you do? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts below. And before you go, I'm leaving 2 more stories on the Screen Channel favorites that might surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.